A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, Part 2, The Quality of Landscape, Chapter 4, Chihuahua and Sonora, Section 2, The Green Lagoons. It is the part of wisdom never to revisit a wilderness, for the more golden the lily, the more certain that someone has gilded it. To return not only spoils a trip, but tarnishes a memory. It is only in the mind that shining adventure remains forever bright. For this reason, I've never gone back to the delta of the Colorado since my brother and I explored it by canoe in 1922. For all we could tell, the delta had lain forgotten since Hernando de Lagoon landed there in 1540. When we camped on the estuary which is said to have harbored his ships, we had not for weeks seen a man or a cow, an axe cut or a fence. Once we crossed an old wagon track, its maker unknown and its errand probably sinister. Once we found a tin can, it was pounced upon as a valuable utensil. Dawn on the delta was whistled in by gamble quail, which roosted in the McQuist's overhanging camp. When the sun peeped over the Sierra Madre, it slanted across 100 miles of lovely desolation, a vast flat bowl of wilderness rimmed by jagged peaks. On the map, the delta was bisected by the river, but in fact, the river was nowhere and everywhere, for he could not decide which of 100 green lagoons offered the most pleasant and least speedy path to the Gulf. So he traveled them all, and so did we. He divided and rejoined, he twisted and turned, he meandered in awesome jungles, he all but ran in circles, he dallied with lovely groves, he got lost and was glad of it, and so were we. For the last word in procrastination, go travel with a river reluctant to lose his freedom in the sea. He leads me by still waters was to us only a phrase in a book until we had nosed our canoe through the green lagoons. If David had not written the psalm, we should have felt constrained to write our own. The still waters were of a deep emerald hue, colored by algae, I suppose, but no less green for all that. A verdant wall of mesquite and willow separated the channel from the thorny desert beyond. At each bend, we saw egrets standing in the pools ahead, each white statue matched by its white reflection. Fleets of cormorants drove their black prows in quest of skittering mullets, avocets, willets, and yellow-leg dozed one leg on the bars. Mallards, widgeons, and teal sprang skyward in alarm. As the birds took the air, they accumulated in a small cloud ahead, there to settle or to break back to our rear. When a troop of egrets settled on a far green willow, they looked like a premature snowstorm. All this wealth of fowl and fish was not for our delectation alone. Often we came upon a bobcat, flattened to some half-immersed driftwood log, paw poised for mullet. Families of raccoons waded the shallows, munching water beetles. Coyotes watched us from inland knolls, waiting to resume their breakfast of mesquite beans, varied, I suppose, by an occasional crippled shorebird, duck, or quail. At every shallow ford were tracks of burrowed deer. We always examined these deer trails, hoping to find signs of the despot of the delta, the great jaguar, Aldigre. We saw neither hide nor hair of him, but his personality pervaded the wilderness. No living beast forgot his potential presence, for the price of unwariness was death. No deer rounded a bush or stopped to nibble pods under a mesquite tree without a premonitory sniff for Aldigre. No campfire died without talk of him. No dog curled up for the night, save at his master's feet. He needed no telling that the king of cats still ruled the night, that those massive paws could fell an ox, those jaws shear of bones like a guillotine. By this time, the delta has probably been made safe for cows, and forever dull for adventuring hunters. Freedom from fear has arrived, but a glory has departed from the green lagoons. When Kipling smelled the supper smokes of Amritsar, he should have elaborated, for no other poet has sung or smelled this green earth's firewoods. Most poets must have subsisted on anthracite. On the delta, one burns only mesquite, the ultimate in fragrant fuels, brittle with 100 frosts and floods, baked by 1,000 suns, the gnarled, imperishable bones of these ancient trees lie ready to hand at every camp, ready to slant blue smoke across the twilight, sing a song of teapots, bake a loaf, brown a kettle of quail, and warm the shins of man and beast. When you have ladled a shovelful of mesquite coals under the Dutch oven, take care not to sit down in that spot before bedtime, lest you rise with a yelp that scares the quail roosting overhead. Mesquite coals have 7 lives. We had cooked with white oak coals in the corn belt. We had smudged our pots with pine in the north woods. We had browned venison ribs over Arizona juniper, but we had not seen perfection until we roasted a young goose with delta mesquite. Those geese deserved the best of brownings, for they had bested us for a week. Every morning we watched the cackling phalanx head inland from the Gulf, shortly to return, replete and silent. What rare provender in what green lagoon was the object of their quest? Again and again we moved camp gooseward, hoping to see them settle to find their banquet board. One day, at about 8 a.m., we saw the phalanx circle, break ranks, side-slip, and fall to earth like maple leaves. Flock after flock followed. At long last, we had found their rendezvous. Next morning, at the same hour, we lay in wait beside an ordinary-looking slough, its bars covered with yesterday's goose tracks. We were already hungry, for it had been a long tramp from camp. My brother was eating a cold roast quail. The quail was halfway to his mouth when a cackle from the sky froze us to immobility. That quail hung in mid-air while the flock circled at leisure, debated, hesitated, and finally came in. That quail fell in the stand when the gun spoke, and all the geese we could eat lay kicking on the bar. More came and settled. The dog lay trembling. We ate quail at leisure, peering through the blind, listening to the small talk. Those geese were gobbling gravel. As one flock filled up and left, another arrived, eager for their delectable stones. Of all the millions of pebbles in the green lagoons, those on this particular bar suited them best. The difference to a snow goose was worth 40 miles of flying. It was worth a long hike to us. Most small game on the delta was too abundant to hunt. At every camp we hung up, in a few minutes shooting, enough quail for tomorrow's use. Good gastronomy demanded at least one frosty night on the stringer as the necessary interlude between roosting in a mesquite and roasting over mesquite. All game was of incredible fatness. Every deer laid down so much tallow that the dimple along his backbone would have held a small pail of water, had he allowed us to pour it. He didn't. The origin of all this opulence was not far to seek. Every mesquite and every tornillo was loaded with pods. The dried-up mud flats bore an annual grass, the grain-like seeds of which could be scooped up by the cupful. There were great patches of a legume resembling coffee weed. If you walked through these, your pockets filled up with shelled beans. I remember one patch of wild melons, or catabacilas, covering several acres of mudflat. The deer and coons had opened the frozen fruits, exposing the seeds. Doves and quail fluttered over this banquet like fruit flies over a ripe banana. We could not, or at least did not, eat what the quail and deer did, but we shared their evident delight in this milk and honey wilderness. The festival mood became our mood. We all reveled in a common abundance and each other's well-being. I cannot recall feeling in settled country a like sensitivity to the mood of the land. Camp keeping in the Delta was not all beer and skittles. The problem was water. The lagoons were saline. The river, where we could find it, was too muddy to drink. At each new camp, we dug a new well. Most wells, however, yielded only brine from the Gulf. We learned the hard way where to dig for sweet water. When in doubt about a new well, we lowered the dog by his hind legs. If he drank freely, it was the signal for us to beach the canoe, kindle the fire, and pitch the tent. Then we sat at peace with the world, while the quail sizzled in the Dutch oven, and the sun sank in glory behind the San Pedro Matilla. Later, dishes washed, we rehearsed the day and listened to the noises of the night. Never did we plan the morrow, for we had learned that in the wilderness some new and irresistible distraction is sure to turn up each day before breakfast. Like the river, we were free to wander. To travel by plan in the Delta is no light matter. We were reminded of this whenever we climbed a cottonwood for a wider view. The view was so wide as to discourage prolonged scrutiny, especially toward the northwest, where a white streak at the foot of the Sierra hung in perpetual mirage. This was the great salt desert on which, in 1829, Alexander Patti died of thirst, exhaustion, and mosquitoes. Patti had a plan to cross the Delta to California. Once we had a plan to portage from one green lagoon to a greener one. We knew it was there by the waterfowl hovering over it. The distance was 300 yards through a jungle of cachinilla, a tall, spear-like shrub which grows in thickets of incredible density. The floods had bent down the spears, which opposed our passage in the manner of Macedonian phalanx. We discreetly withdrew, persuaded that our lagoon was prettier anyhow. Getting caught in a maze of Cachinia phalanxes was a real danger that no one had mentioned, whereas the danger we had been warned against failed to materialize. When we launched our canoe above the border, there were dire predictions of sudden death. Far huskier craft, we were told, had been overwhelmed by the tidal bore, a wall of water that rages up the river from the Gulf with certain incoming tides. We talked about the bore, we spun elaborate schemes to circumvent it. We even saw it in our dreams, with dolphins riding its crest and an aerial escort of screaming gulls. When we reached the mouth of the river, we hung our canoe in a tree and waited 2 days, but the bore let us down. It did not come. The delta have no place names, and we had to devise our own as we went. One lagoon we call the Relito, and it is here that we saw pearls in the sky. We were lying flat on our backs, soaking up November sun, staring idly at a soaring buzzard overhead. Far beyond him, the sky suddenly exhibited a rotating circle of white spots, alternately visible and invisible. A faint bugle note soon told us they were cranes, inspecting their delta and finding it good. At the time, my ornithology was homemade, and I was pleased to think them whooping cranes because they were so white. Doubtless, they were sandhill cranes, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that we were sharing our wilderness with the wildest of living fowl. We and they had found a common home in the remote fastnesses of space and time. We were both back in the Pleistocene. Had we been able to, we would have bugled back their greeting. Now, from the far reaches of the years, I see them wheeling still. All this was far away and long gone. I'm told the green lagoons now raise cantaloupes. If so, they should not lack flavor. Man always kills the thing he loves, and so we, the pioneers, have killed our wilderness. Someday, we had to. Be that as it may, I'm glad I shall never be young without wild country to be young in. Of what avail the 40 freedoms without a blank spot on the map?